A big part of growth for me is figuring out how fast can I get to the formula where I know reliably that given these inputs, I get that output. Until we get the inputs that give us the outputs, we don't have an opportunity to scale.
Welcome to the Raquel Show. This show is for entrepreneurs who want to play bigger in business and in life. And today I have a very, very special guest, and you all are in for a treat. He is one that has impacted my life for many years and has changed my family's future forever. He is a serial entrepreneur with an extensive background, multiple exits, and had an exit that in a company that he grew to 3.4 billion. Yes, I said billion. And he now helps and partners with companies that are 3 million and up. He's got 220 million in annual revenues from what I can gather. Like I said, his background is so extensive on Google if you just Google him. But I am so excited and honored to interview a special human being who walks on water, because beyond all of those great things, what I'm most impressed about is his humble heart and his positive attitude and how he pours in so much value to people and continues to impact the world. So welcome to the show, Sharran Srivatsaa.
Raquel, thank you so much. Thank you for being my hype person. I appreciate that. And a lot of people don't realize how hard it is to create a show, create a platform, get guests, set it up, build this, edit it, post it, share it. And thank you for one, doing this because you don't have to. And two, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to share.
Well, speaking of, I wouldn't have had this show had it not been the person that you guys are all listening to or watching right now. And because you do so many things, I'm just going to get right into it.
Yeah.
Since I know you do a lot of things very well and you speak on stages and deliver some of the best keynotes in the world, when someone asks you, what do you do? How do you answer that?
The tough ones first. I always think about what really, really floats my boat. And when I see other people succeed, it brings me more joy than anything else. And interestingly, that'd be like, oh yeah, Sharran, of course you would say something like, when you see other people succeed, it brings you joy. But I learned this through a lot of inner work, where I learned the fact that getting people, helping people, watching people succeed is actually a requirement for me. It is, in a lot of ways, it's a selfish thing. Some people think that, oh yeah, of course you'll say that. But when I see that, if I have some personal success in my life, yes, I have 7 out of 10 of joy. But when I see you, Raquel, succeed, I have 11 out of 10 of joy. And I started to realize that. And I started to realize that was actually a fundamental part of who I was. And I needed to own that. I needed to articulate that. I needed to call that out and not just think of it as a philanthropic thing in some way. So now I force myself, design my life to put myself in situations where I am almost a minority partner. How can I be a support system for people to succeed? Because I call it a 99% selfless, 1% selfish thing, meaning 99% feels like, yes, Raquel is succeeding. That's awesome. But I really need it personally, because when that happens for me, it really fills my cup. So I wake up every morning and figure out how can I put myself in situations where I can see other people succeed, because it lets me be 99% selfless and 1% selfish.
Did I tell you how humble this person is that you guys are listening to? And I'm sure with all of that, and I think that's awesome, you probably get pitched a lot of opportunities and different things, or people asking you to help them. I'm sure your DMs blow up. How do you determine which to say yes to, and also at the same time, protect your time?
I'll give you a couple of answers to that. I've thought about this a lot. And if we don't have a framework of thinking about it, we're just going to get completely plowed through, and we'll get resentful, we'll get irritated. We're like, man, I spent this whole week doing all these non-revenue generating calls, and now I'm kind of bummed about it. So 3 really big things. Thing number 1 is If I know and I can feel that the person that I'm going to spend time with will actually do or share or build and take advantage of the advice or the time together, I'm in. That at least that automatically makes me feel like, hey, if I spend time with Raquel and I know and I feel that she's going to take action on this and the time was going to be well spent, I'm automatically in. That's part one. Part two is anyone that is thinking about reciprocity to me, I stay away from. Meaning, hey, if you can do this for me, what can I do for you? Right. And so people will say, how can I return the favor? And like that instantly goes to a scorecard mentality for me. Hey, I did this for you. What are you going to do for me? And I think about the world as a no scorecard mentality. I want to show up and do whatever it takes. And the scorecard thing always like stresses me out because now I'm like, okay, she's counting a 2-to-1 for me right now. And it totally stresses me out. And the third, mechanically speaking, my assistant Helen blocks off 2 30-minute calls on my calendar every single week where there are empty spots. And sure, she knows that those 2 calls, called them the free calls, the helpful calls, she can put people on. And I have 2 slots a week set up for that. So now I never feel resentful because I already committed 2 slots a week to give back, to share for new opportunities, et cetera. So as soon as I started doing that, Raquel, I stopped thinking about, maybe I'll take this meeting up. But a lot of people say, I'll take this meeting, but I'll put it out 6 weeks from now, just so I feel better that it's not clogging my calendar now. But I already have 2 slots a week already booked for these opportunities. So I just fill them as much as I can. And you know what the crazy part is? The opportunities and the calls and the meetings that I took that I had no idea were going to anything were going to come off of them. Those are the ones that have created the biggest kind of transformations in my life. So just kind of having the thought process that, do I believe that this person will respect this time? Number 2, does this person have a no scorecard mentality? And number 3, will they fit in one of those blocks? And by the way, if the next 3 weeks of blocks are already filled, I'm sorry, they're filled. So go to week 4, but there's always time. And just structuring that in my schedule made it a lot more approachable for me as opposed to it, and took away all the resentment from the process.
I just love how you break down those things. And now I'm curious, what has been one of those transformations that were one of the biggest in your life when you took some of these calls?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So many years ago, when we were running our real estate business at Telus Properties, there was this gal who was working in our front desk. And she's great. And I hope she's listening to this. Her name is Sunny. And in the first kind of 10 minutes of meeting her, I was like, you're awesome. Like, you're awesome. I would try to spend as much time with her, give her as many opportunities. And one day she came to me, she's like, hey, Sharran, can I spend some time with you? I think I'm going to leave Telus. And I was like, why? I didn't have to take that meeting. It was personal. And I said, she's like, well, I want to go get my MBA. And I said, awesome. Would there be a way where you could still work and get your MBA? And I'll help you manage both. And she's like, you do that? And I was like, well, let's talk about that. Right. So we built a plan for her to do that. So she got her MBA while she was working at the company. And then a year after she got her MBA, she's like, well, what do I do next in my career? And I was like, well, here's what you should do. I trust you. Write yourself a new job description in the business. Show me what you would do. So she created the time and she showed me what she would do. I'm actually going somewhere with this. A year after that, she got in a new role. She did a great job and she maxed out in our ceiling in the business. There was nowhere else to go. She told me, hey, Sharran, my next big thing I want to do is I want to be like a director of operations or a COO for a big business like this. Those roles are already filled here. What do I do next? And I was like, hey, I'll keep opportunities open, but I'm not sure. So she then left us to go get another opportunity. Well, fascinatingly, she left Telus to go to Douglas Elliman. And she was actually responsible for setting up the meeting for our business being acquired, all because I was really friendly and supportive and collaborative with our front desk person.
What a powerful story. And that is a huge transformation. So speaking of that exit, you're a master of scaling businesses and you've helped a lot of people. Let's just talk about scaling. It's like, how does one business, because you scaled that in 5 years, right? You got it to 3.4. How does one scale a business so quickly?
It's easy looking back, but hard looking forward. There is in the technology world or in the online world, they call it product market fit, right? And so the hardest part is trying to figure out product market fit. Now, let me explain. there is a big difference in, at least in my mind, using language between growth and scale. Growth to me is saying, hey, how do I figure out how to grow our business, our top line, our operations, our infrastructure so that I can meet demand? So growth requires cash. A lot of people think that, hey, just because my business grows, I'm going to make more money. Not necessarily. Growth requires cash, it requires effort and all of that. But for me, when we grow, what I'm testing to see in growth is there a formula? Meaning, if I can do these 5 things, will these 10 things come out on the other side? So in every growth component, for me, growth is an experiment. It's can I pull this lever? Will we grow? If we got 3 more agents, can we get 100 million more in revenue? Yes, awesome. If we got 30, would we get $1 billion? Great. I see a formula for that. But a big part of growth for me is figuring out how fast can I get to the formula where I know reliably that given these inputs, I get that output. And because as soon as you get that formula of sorts or some kind of equation, you're like, hey, I know the inputs that will give us the outputs. Until we get the inputs that give us the outputs, we don't have an opportunity to scale. So I tell even the portfolio companies that we invest in, hey, you're in growth mode. You don't know what you're growing yet. It's going to be hard. It's going to be painful. Let's do it. But as soon as we get the formula, now it's just a question of you either need more leads or more appointments. You need more of something to blow it up. So the hardest part, Raquel, was trying to get product market fit and saying, can we get this formula for growth? And then once you get the formula, now you know you can just pour gas on it. So I just obsess early on about, is there a formula for growth? Is there a formula? Is there a formula? And I test a lot. And as you test a lot, you start to figure out what does not work and what works. And so it feels really messy. You and I have talked about it, right? It's hard in the beginning to start something. It's messy in the middle, because that's where you're trying to figure out the formula. And then it's glorious at the end. But the messy part is coming up with that formula. And so if someone is listening to this, the big part of the formula that Raquel and I are talking about is you should be able to nail business plan, right? I should be able to ask you, how does a business make money? How does Netflix make money? Well, Netflix has subscribers pay bills. To keep subscribers on the platform, they have to build a bunch of new shows. That's it. That's the model. So if they stop building new shows, they're going to have people drop off. And so the model breaks. And so the big part of hitting that scale component is, hey, what's my formula? What's my business model formula? So if we can answer that question, we're very close to the scale component.
You know, what's really interesting as you break that down is the whole scale concept. And I'm curious to know, do you go into this once you've got the formula? Do you go into it or do you go into every business? Because you've had several successful exits of saying, I want to sell this. This is only like temporary, or like, and then do you build a plan around that? Because I often find people that we mentor is like, we want to scale it just for the sake of like scaling to revenue goals, but not necessarily exit. So like, how do you determine that? Or do you go into these businesses after you look into it, or like, we're going to scale this? Because obviously you get bigger multipliers as you scale it bigger.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about that.
No, totally. So knowing what I know now, if I could do it all over again, I would not sell anything. And I'll answer that first because takes so long to build infrastructure. It's working really well. And when someone wants to buy the business, they have realized that you have built something for them that they can't build fast enough. That itself should tell us that we're sitting on an insanely powerful asset. Additionally, here's a vulnerable component. A lot of times when we as entrepreneurs put our personal lives, our personalities, our personal brands to grow something, there is a significant identity lock with that thing. And when we sold TELUS to Douglas Elliman, Raquel, it took me 18, 24 months just to like work through that. That was not me. Like I was not the business anymore. Someone wrote me a big check to walk away, but I almost felt resentment. I was like, how can you take my baby away from me? And then my wife was like, you sold it. Like it was your choice, right? So if you think about the biggest entrepreneurs in the world, just whether you like him or not, take in Elon Musk. He's not selling anything. He took SolarCity public. He is growing Tesla. He bought Twitter. The way to actually grow insane wealth is to buy and to build. That's the biggest part. And that's the unlock that no one will tell us. The crazy part is this though. 9 out of 10 times, not all times, 9 out of 10 times, the buyer of the business actually wins significantly more than the seller, right? 9 out of 10 times. Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion. Everyone was like, whoa, $1 billion. Like now, without Instagram, there is no Facebook or Meta or whatever you call it, right? So Facebook benefited significantly more from that. So coming back to the how do you think with the end in mind question, when it comes to a business, it's not about the exit, it's about the options. And the better we can run the business, the more options we have at the end. And I'll give you an example for when we were running TELUS, we were growing well, and we had several options. We could continue our growing in California. We could franchise around the US. We could just bolt on super teams. We could sell a piece of the company away. And then until Element came along, or we could do the sale. So we had a lot of what we call walkaway power, right? And so when you have walkaway power, it allows you to do more. So I think more about, could we think about multiple options as opposed to just saying, I want to sell the business? What are those options? What are the commonalities of those options? Can we build those things? And that works really, really well. And the only way to do that, what I've noticed, it's just hard for a lot of people because it'll hit their ego. I personally let's take the TELUS example, to market every year. So every summer, I did a soft sale and ran a process to be like, hey, XYZ company, we were thinking about selling the business. Here is our entire package. Here's our balance sheet. Here's our P&Ls. Here's everything that you want. Make us an offer. And then they'll say, hey, we're going to pick a number. We're going to give you $100. And I go, thank you. Awesome. Why? And then they give you rationale. So now I know the rationale, how they're thinking about it. Then I asked them, I guess, well, you said it was $100. What if I wanted a 140? They're like, well, Sharran, if you want 140, you got to do things A, B, C, D, and E. I'm like, awesome. Thank you. I took A, B, C, D, and E, handed it to my COO, and I said, that's the business plan for next year. Then we did it again. I say, oh, it's 140 now. Hey, what if I wanted 210? Hey, you need to do A, B, C, D, and E. I'm like, thank you so much. Took that, handed it to my COO, and said, that's the business plan for next year. Literally, that's all we did for 5 years, because otherwise we get stuck thinking that we know what is necessary for the growth of the business. If we ever want someone else to help buy it, partner with it, et cetera, they need to start putting their eyes on it sooner. And we think that, oh my gosh, they'll copy our business, they'll take our clients and all of that. They are so busy. They have no interest in doing any of that. And there's no other way to get perspective on what they would actually say or pay for something. So until they put a number, I had no idea. And all my soft sale meetings were all related to figuring out like what the next business plan was. Even now in several of our portfolio companies, if you can't do that, what we end up doing is you either want to have someone tell you how they would buy your business, or we can also say, well, if we went and bought somebody else, what would that look like? So we can say, hey, I'm a $10 million business. Here's another $1 million business. Do I give that person 10%? How does it work? And negotiate it? And they're like, wow, okay, there's value there. There are options here. So the more we actually put ourselves in the position of where it is, you start to figure out the options. If you're listening and you're thinking about selling your business, we should start planning and going to market softly over the next 2 to 3 years, because you can't just wait and wake up 3 years from now and say, I want to sell my business. That's really, really difficult. So I don't think it's about the exit. It's about the options.
So much gold in that, because what you did when you soft sold is you actually got eyeballs on where the gaps were in your business. And even today, with how fast things change, if you pitch it could have been great for 1 year, but it could be a totally different buyer, what they're looking for the next year. And so looking back, then you actually said, I would never sell. What would you do differently?
I think the sale was good for everybody, only because we had different partners in different phases in their lives. But I would have told myself, hey, come up with a bigger vision or a bigger plan or a bigger structure or a bigger strategy, saying, what could I, now that we've done a 10X, how could I, is there really a 100X opportunity? Or is there an opportunity where this business could work completely without me? Or is there a business where I like X area of this business, but I don't like other A, B, C, D? Could I just do that day to day? I'll give you a really simple example. I advise a portfolio of real estate businesses in Australia. The CEO is 37 years old, super sharp. And he was so tired being the CEO of multiple companies. And I said, well, he's like, I'm just going to shut it all down. I was like, what do you mean? Like, why would you do that? He goes, well, I'm so stressed that I think I'm just going to shut it down. So he started shutting down divisions. I was like, you need to stop. Let's hire a CEO for the business. So we hired a CEO for the business. And I asked him, I said, Chris, what would you rather do? And Raquel, he says, I just want to sell. I just want to go into living rooms and sell homes. And I go, really? You have he's like, I just want to sell homes. That's all I want to do. So we put him into the chief sales evangelist role. And we have a CEO that runs everything else. And now he lives in his joy and he makes like 5 times more money with no stress. And it all works and he can take vacations and do all of that. But he thought that since he was the principal and the CEO and the founder, if he couldn't do all of the other projects, he had to shut projects down. And the other wild part is if someone is listening and they're like, hey, I have these 2 projects that I started. I'm not giving this project B more attention. Instead of shutting it down, see if you can bring in a partner to take on that project. You can literally say, hey, Raquel, you want to come in and run this? Awesome. I'll give you 50-50 for the first year, 80-20 for the next few years. Now, at least your baby comes to life and you get paid and there are synergies around it. I'm shocked at how people shut stuff down. And I realized that was my limited thinking because I was like, the only way to monetize an asset I thought was to sell it. And that was the unlock for me that was not just the answer.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. I know that people are going to be like, let me rewind as I listen to Sharran. And speaking of exit, I have one more question around that because you brought something up and I think it's so valid, is when you exit and you've helped so many other people exit as well, like several things. And we have helped, professional athletes with real estate. And there's something that happens with that whole identity shift because they've poured so much into that. And even with some of the people that we mentor, once they reach to a certain goal, they've leveraged everything out, they've fired themselves. They almost feel like this sense of emptiness or like I'm not fulfilled or I'm not needed anymore. And could you speak to like what your mental journey was or what you see with entrepreneurs when they do exit? Because I think there's a thing that happens after that people don't talk about all the time.
It's really sad. I have seen more entrepreneurs get depressed post-sale, and then they'll start doing things like, oh, I'm just an investor now. So for them, the reason I have several friends who've had multiple exits, and the smart ones won't start another company. They're like, oh, I'm going to take some time. And while I take some time, since I have this liquidity, I'm going to be an investor. The reason they're an investor is now they get to place bets and they get to see a company without starting it. They get to be involved and touch and feel. And when non-professional investors, like not people who are not like a Warren Buffett that invest for a living, the angel investors who are like, I have cash, I'm going to write checks, is they're doing it for one, betting on someone else, but 2, it's very vicarious pleasure. They're trying to transfer identity to be like, I'm sort of involved in this. I get to, so they write a check to make sure that they feel serious about a project they're involved in. And I am very guilty of that, right? I thought I'd start writing checks and that would be my way of being involved in a business. Well, if there's a $1 million capital raise and I wrote a $250,000 check, at the end of the day, yes, it's a lot of money, but the CEO of that company is like, hey, this is a passive investment. Stay the heck out of my way. Like, I don't want, I appreciate you for advice when I call you once a quarter, but because of that, I started writing more checks because I wanted to have more conversations with people because since I didn't have inner work on my identity, I thought I would seek it elsewhere. And the thing that I did not realize, Raquel, was I did not do any kind of thinking or planning for what would happen post-exit. And I started doing that when it actually happened, as opposed to it happening before, which caused 2 really painful things. When we don't have a sense of what's going to happen post-exit or post whatever, we take the current process very seriously. So like while I was in the sale, I was so like, this was such a personal thing for me and I was so intense about it. And then when it was done, I was so depressed about it. Instead, if I had known what was happening post-sale, it would have helped me handle the current situation and the future situation significantly better. So now a lot of the times when I help several of our partner companies sell, my idea for them is, hey, let's plan out kind of like the next 12 months. What does it look like? So I reduce anxiety dramatically for them so they can see life post having this identity thing and saying, what would I do? How would I work? Like they start to think about their life, and it really freaks them out because their life revolves around this baby that they've built in a lot of ways. Right. And I think it's a good thing because that's what helped build that baby. And I didn't realize how much inner work it took. And it took me a lot longer than I thought, but I'm a better person today because of that inner work. And I was telling my coach the other day, I'm actually glad that I had a 5-year non-compete, because if I did not, I would have done some ridiculously stupid things. I would have spent money or started something that I was just for the sake of starting it to get back into doing something to get my mind occupied, but only because I did not plan or at least think what that post process would look like. So I think the exit is one thing, but a lot of us have different milestone events, right? So it may be as something as simple as I'm not going to check my email anymore and I'm going to have my assistant check my email. Something as simple as that. There's an identity shift there where you're like, wait a minute, someone else is going to look at my stuff. So if we don't plan for even small things like that, that's why it's hard for people to let go. So anytime we change our normal routine, we probably have to think a little bit into the future as to what it means for us. And having like a great support system, like talking to someone like you or a coach or whatever, is really important because they've been through that multiple times with different people, and you can see that. And you can short circuit that so much faster because it took me way too long.
You brought up a lot of gold, and now I see why our athletes have to go through programs, or there's coaches if they are going to exit and retire or they got injured. And then same thing for us. Like, I'm actually blessed looking back that I had a non-compete and somebody gave me the advice of don't do anything, don't say yes to anything for at least 6 months. And go internal, because you start to, I probably would have said yes to go build the next big thing. And it was more probably out of ego than what I really wanted to do.
Yeah. Right. I'll tell you my biggest learning in this, in going through these multiple kind of exits, which were, I say exits, both from a positive exit and also I had coupled go completely to zero, one during the pandemic as well. So I know the other side of it as well, right? Because it's really painful. But my coach did something really powerful to me. She said, the world will not let you integrate your lessons until you memorialize your learnings. And I was like, what does that mean? She goes, if you can't put language to your learnings, then they're just thoughts and feelings. If you really want the learnings, you have to memorialize them. So she gave me 30 days after the last sale. And I went to the beach every morning at 5 o'clock. I sat on the same bench. I had the sketch pad and I would just write in my notebook. And my goal was to come up with these lessons. And I wrote 37 lessons learned after building and growing and selling TELUS. And those 37 lessons, Raquel, I wrote a blog post about it. Those 37 lessons, I have not even edited it in 5+ years. And they still ring true today. And because of those, just memorializing those made it really, really powerful for me. I'll give you one simple example, which is you can't do epic stuff with B players, right? And so my business partner told me that was a huge lesson. So now whenever I see an A player, I want to do whatever it takes to partner with them, hire them, do something with them right away, because I got this beacon for A players now. But if I had not memorialized that as a learning, it's really tough. So a lot of people go through significantly impactful experiences, but don't take a few minutes to memorialize learnings. And so even if it's 1, 2, or 3 learnings, I think putting language around your feelings is really powerful.
Yeah. And even probably quieting your mind, right? You were able to sit on that beach. For me, it was either going to play golf because you couldn't really be on the phone, or like the spa because you couldn't bring your phone in. And so I think that just helped a lot with that inner work. And you talked about A players. What do you think makes a really good A player?
I like 3 things when I look for in someone that's an A player. The first one is they just have impeccable integrity. Like you can tell that from how they're speaking. Number 2, they are extremely reflectively aware. So they're coachable, because now you can say, wow, they're have high integrity and they're coachable. And the third, they're just wicked smart. Right. And so when I see somebody have depth in something, it really is really powerful. And for a lot of people who say, well, I'm younger, I'm just starting my career, I don't have depth. No, you have depth in your commitment to learning. That's a good thing as well. And you can tell that very quickly. There's a reason why when you and I, Raquel, meet somebody, you're like, there is something special about Jimmy. There's something special about Jenny. You and I, like when we met, there's something special, right? But what is it? And normally it is you feel aligned because of character. They are open enough to be coachable, and they do something. They're wicked smart in some way, which you admire. So I think it's very hard to find an A player to work with that you don't admire in some way, because admiration is the fabric of like our humanity, right? And I love spending time with people like you because I admire you. I think it's like you're awesome. So the more time you can spend around people that you admire, I think it's very uplifting.
Oh, Sharran, you are so kind. Oh my gosh, I'm like blushing, and I didn't even think a Filipino could blush, right? So where on the flip side, where do you think entrepreneurs fail when it comes to scaling?
That's a tough one, mechanically speaking. I'll give you a couple of thoughts that come to mind. The first thought that comes to mind is thinking that the idea that they have is the greatest idea ever, right? And so we're like, oh, I have this, I know better, etc. And I think that letting your market validate the idea is a really good thing. So I was talking to one of our partner companies, and he loved this idea. He loved this product and offering that he had. And he goes, I'm really mad that no one's buying this and my salespeople are not able to sell this. And I told him something very interesting. And I was like, hey, let me ask you something different. I know you like this idea. What would make your salesperson be able to sell this offer better? And he's like, well, if I change this, this, and this, they'll be able to sell it better. I go, great, let's do that for a week. He did it. Sales went up. I was like, I told him, I was like, what you did was now you let go of your feeling around this and you got closer to product market fit. Mm-hmm. Mastery of product market fit comes when your salesperson that is disconnected from you can sell more stuff. Because that's when you know, when your salesperson's job's getting easier and easier, that's when you know you've totally nailed it. As opposed to if you and I as the principals have to go sell something, it's really wild. So I'll give you a really simple example. So one of my, you know this person. So one of my friends, Eileen Rivera, she's a great real estate agent in Long Beach, California. Eileen asked me once, she's like, well, Sharran, she's like, I'm closing 95% of my listing appointments. And I go, yeah, you're not going on enough appointments. Right. And so she's like, it just blew her mind. And I go, you know that the job is not to close 95% of your appointments, right? The job is to make sure your team has so many opportunities that this process becomes so easy to do. I was like, you don't have product market fit for one reason. And that reason is it needs you and your capability to close every time. Can we set up a system where our teams can close? And that's when you know your offering is perfect. So number one thing from a scale perspective is we think that our ideas are perfect. And I think we just need to battle test them, because if someone tells me, it's like, if you share an idea with me, I'm like, I'm not sure that will work. It's important, right? Because there's a reason why I'm like, it's not resonating, right? Like it's not resonating. The second is good visionary entrepreneurs are so far ahead of their skis because they are in today's world of social media. And then they're like, well, this person's doing $1 billion and that person's doing $1 billion. I'm like, you know how much $1 billion is? Like, it's a lot of money. Like, none of us need billions of dollars to have an insane life, but it is made, but aspirationally, I think it's a really good thing. But so now you have the average startup who has not made $1 of revenue in sales, who think they're going to be $1 billion startup. And I think there's a significant gap there, and the gap crushes your humility, because you just have this big expectation that, well, if everybody can do it, I can do it too. And you haven't even sold anything. So the other thing that I want to bring to the surface for a lot of people is, hey, I love the big goals. All I'm suggesting is let's milestone these goals out so you feel like you know what your next milestone is. So you make decisions about that today. Because when entrepreneurs get ahead of their skis, they get kind of, there's a lot of hubris around that stuff. And so they're like, well, if he can do it, I can do it too. And so I try to pull people back just a little bit, saying, hey, we're a $10 million business. Let's now try to operate this like a public company. Like, there's a big difference there. When we can stay ahead of where we are, but not over our skis, I think it just allows us to go much faster.
So good. So good, Sharran. There's a lot of people that listen to this show, and we've talked a lot about scaling. And let's say a lot of them have scaled their businesses, have some money. And one of the things that you do and talk about really well is investing. So we're going to switch gears for a little bit. There's a lot of fear in the economy and in the market right now, and you're a very active and intelligent investor. So I'm sure you get asked the question, where should people invest their money today?
Yeah, so super hard. I speak from experience where I have lost more money than, like, my wife laughs at me. She's like, we've lost more money than most people will ever make. And like, that's crazy to think about it and actually put language around that, because her thing is, can you imagine, like, her favorite thing is from a risk perspective. We've lost more money than most people will ever make. You'll be fine. Go do whatever you need to do, right? Which is really fun. Different people are very bio-individual on how they invest. So I'll suggest two ways of thinking about it. Way number one, my advisors, Russ Morgan and Joey Murray, they have this thing called the investor DNA. And it's super cool. It's like the investor disc profile. So if people are familiar with the disc profile, think about this as an investor disc, because how we run our lives you don't want to have a high D in the disc profile, do mechanical tasks. They're just not wired that way. But we've learned how to work, but not learned how to put at-risk capital investing. So if you just type in Wealth Without Wall Street, Investor DNA, I think they have this investor disc, which is super cool. I think every single person should take this investor DNA, because it tells you how you're wired as an investor, and you can just stay in alignment with that significantly. And just doing that alone made me a better thinker about all of it. Like that's foundationally super important. Otherwise you're like, oh, my friend's doing a startup, I'll write a check and this and that. And now you realize like, it's just not your jam. So you're not aligned. Number two, I'd love to give everybody a very quick framework. So I use this as a 4-box framework, and I can draw it up for Jenny and the team later. But the idea is there's 4 categories that I think about. Number one, whenever I look at an investment, and then we'll put an investment through it to see how it kind of shakes out. Capital preservation. If I put this in on a scale of 0 to 25, so there's a total score 100, and each of the 4 is 25 points. On a scale of 0 to 25, does this investment that I'm making have a high degree of capital preservation? So for example, if I put my money in my mattress, capital preservation is 25 out of 25. So great. The second is tax efficiency. Am I getting some tax advantages, at least in North America, related to this in some way? If I'm getting a lot, 25. If I'm getting nothing, 0. The third is there some kind of yield or cash flow that comes from this? If there is, awesome, 0 out of 25. And the last is this going to grow in some way? So capital preservation, tax efficiency, yield and growth, or cash flow and growth. So now let's take a very simple example. Let's take Bitcoin, right? Capital preservation on Bitcoin, I'm sorry, like it's probably 5 out of 25. So that you got to score a 5 now. Tax efficiency, unless you do things like staking, et cetera, you're probably not going to get much with that. So say I'll give it another 5 if you get fancy. So you got 10. Cash flow, unless you do something fancy with how you do Bitcoin, you're probably not going to get a lot of cash flow from yielding and staking. So I'll give it another 5 for that. That's 15 out of 75. And growth, yeah, it can grow. Maybe I don't know how many and how much. So I'll give it 20 out of 25. So I have 15 plus 20. That's 35 out of 100. That's my score in my head as the initial start. But now take like a multifamily investment, right? Just assume that you have the cash for it. Capital preservation, very high because it's backed by real estate. So I'm going to give it 20 out of 25. Tax efficiency, very high because it allows you to take depreciation, which is awesome. So I'll give it 20 out of 25. Yield or cash flow, yes, each of them pay monthly payments. So that's another 20 out of 25. Growth, it's great because there's a business tied to the real estate component. So that grows. So now I'm at an 80 out of 100. All I'm trying to do is when I get an investment idea, instead of thinking, do I want to invest in it? I instantly put it through this filter. And I'm just saying, does this score shake out with what I'm thinking? If it doesn't, it allows me to battle test it a little bit. Additionally, Raquel, when I'm actually evaluating an investment, it allows me to ask those questions. So if I don't know if it's an oil and natural gas investment, I'm like, hey, so Jenny, tell me about like the last 10 years about capital preservation on this. Now I know, hey, are there any tax advantages to this? Great. Hey, is there any cash flow component to this? Oh, interesting. In the next 5 to 10 years, do you expect this to grow? So we actually become better investors by asking questions in this matrix that allows you to fill out this matrix some more. So what you and I would invest a little differently than Brixton would, right? Just differently, just because he's younger. And that's okay. But the framework doesn't change because the world's very similar. So now it makes it bio-individual for people.
By the way, speaking of Brexton, he said the other day, Mom, my Coinbase account is not doing so well.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. That's awesome.
And that's all, by me teaching him what I've learned from you. So speaking of investing, what about in a business? What should people really think about when it comes to investing strategically in their business?
As the business grows, I believe that there are two key people that need to be in the business that not a lot of people talk about. Number one is, and this is for two reasons. Reason one is, as a business grows, most people get irritated that things fall through the cracks. And when that starts to happen, it bothers people because they're like, oh, I want to grow faster, right? And the second is, they also get resentful that they're having to do a bunch of manual things. They're having to check the boxes, watch the checklist, etc. So in our 700% organization in our last company, we hired these two people that completely changed the trajectory of our business. Person number one was a certified project manager. They come up with the designation PMP, that's project management professional or something like that. Her job in the business was to attend every meeting and build timelines and plans and deliverables. She didn't do any work. She just kept everybody accountable to do the work that they did. So she would show up on every meeting that I sat on. She'd be like, oh, there's this marketing plan to build these three things. She would write it all up. She would build a Gantt chart. She would hold everybody accountable to that schedule. So if I needed something, I did not have to ask marketing. I just had to ask her, hey, what's the status on this? And she knew the status on everything. And that let people, it was never about holding anybody accountable because the process held people accountable and nothing ever fell through the cracks. Mm-hmm. Having that one person with the entire job as to run projects was awesome and not an expensive position, which was the cool part. The cool part is you can also get that in a consultant form, even if you're just running strategic plans or something like that. The second person that we brought on was an automation specialist. It was the coolest thing because this person would sit in on meetings and be like, I don't understand why it's taking us 1 day to onboard somebody. Can you give me the 72-point checklist and you can hit one button and it'll do everything in a minute. And so when you have somebody in there with the skill where they're just looking to automate things, it got very, very good. And here was the learning for me, Raquel. Automation, right? You think about it and you're like, oh, if I automate a bunch of things, it becomes really efficient, which is good. That was the side benefit. But what I learned was amateurs automate for efficiency, but professionals automate for accuracy. And when you automate something, it is extremely accurate. It goes out at 6 a.m. It's the perfect email. It's the perfect Trello board. It's the perfect text message. Everything is perfect, right? And so I was thinking, wow, I thought automation was about efficiency, but it really unlocked for me that automation is about accuracy. And that's where it is. So having those two people in a role in a fast growing business, I think can dramatically change how you think about the world.
Oh my God. So interesting and so good because you can definitely, and and some of the people that are listening as you start to grow and scale, things break, right? And even automation as much. And so having that key person, I have never even thought about it that way of having an automation person for the accuracy, because there will be gaps as you start to grow in your business. So I always hear when it comes to wealthy people that you either have 7 lines of income or, 4 lines. What's your thought on that since you're a student of investing money and just studying people and being around a lot of wealthy people?
Yeah. So there's a causation and correlation, right? So does Bill Gates have multiple streams of revenue? Sure. But he didn't start with that. That's not how it started. He got there to a certain point, and now he used the resources to create that stuff. The best way to create wealth is concentration. When we spend our time and effort building something, that's what creates wealth. Elon Musk is not buying 17 single-family homes in Sacramento, California. That's not how Elon created. Elon's weird. He's an alien, and I get it, right? That's strange, right? But you take anybody, Warren Buffett works on one thing. He is an investor, right? Jeff Bezos works on one thing. It's Amazon. Now he has whatever, Blue Horizon or whatever. But all of these people have deep concentration in what they've created. When I worked at Goldman Sachs, we worked with companies who were going through the exit process and entrepreneurs that were creating a lot of wealth. And Raquel, it would blow your mind. The single most important thing in all of them was they had spent all this time in what I call private equity, as in their equity was tied into one big asset that they monetized. And we think that it's all about like having multiple streams. Now, the multiple streams is good, and we talk about it in 10 seconds, but the fastest way to wealth creation is saying, hey, if I started building something today, can I build this for the next 10 years? Even if it's buying a single family portfolio, one home's not going to do anything for you. But when you do buy 2 homes a year for 20 years, and then your payoff cycle starts to happen, well, the concentration of that gets really good. So the fastest way to grow wealth is concentrated in something that you're passionate about, something that you have capability in, something that you're actually willing to do for a very, very long time. Otherwise, you don't enjoy the process of the wealth creation in any way. That's number one. But number two is, people talk about passive income a lot. And it's such a myth because you can't just like wake up in the morning and say, I want passive income, right? Like I'm spending a lot of time like defining passive income for myself. And I call it passive income is pre-funded income. So you have to pre-fund this income with one of two things. You either have to pre-fund it with effort or you have to pre-fund it with money. So you and I work on a project, we get it up and running. Our sweat equity is what it's in it. And then in 3 years, it starts paying back. Yes, but we pre-funded it with our effort. Or so like the easiest way to think about this is the affiliate business, right? Hey, we did a lot of marketing. We did all the effort up front. Somebody bought something. Now we get paid. Cool. That's passive. Or we have to pre-fund it with some cash. So like I spend $100,000 and I buy a piece of a multifamily property. And now I get, 6 to 8 grand a year. Is it 6 or 8% return? But I'm pre-funding this income. What people don't realize, for people that have a lot of revenue streams, is that they've pre-funded that either with effort or with resources or with partnerships or something like that. So the more concentration you have, you can do more with it because now you can barter, trade, and do things with that. But the fastest way to wealth creation is concentration, and passive income is like, you got to think about it as pre-funded income in some way.
That is so good the way you broke it down, because you think about those principles. I think it also applies to business, and some of the people that we also mentor is like, they want to start a real estate team. They want to start a title company. They want to start a mortgage company, and they want to start a moving and staging company. And they're not really like focused on one thing, and their results are extremely scattered.
Whenever someone tells me that thing, right, I instantly, I'm a aspirational encouragement kind of person. I'm like, awesome. Not how are we going to do that or when are we going to do that? I just ask, who's going to run that? Right? That's it. I'm like, if someone tells me that they're going to start a mortgage company or a title company or whatever, I'm like, awesome. Who's going to run it? Because now if you're going to run it, who's going to run our current business plan? And so to me, as soon as there is a who, not how component, but someone needs to, if we have something important in our lives, someone needs to wake up in the morning and think about that thing. You have a puppy. I used to raise puppies. Someone needs to wake up in the morning and actually take, like, who the puppy is, whose responsibility? Like, there is a responsibility, right? So if sales is broken in our business, someone needs to wake up in the morning and obsess over growing sales. Otherwise, that will never grow. So a lot of times, whenever people want to launch new things, I just ask, hey, who is going to run this? And if they tell me nobody yet, I want to get it to the point. I'm like, awesome. When is someone going to run this? Now, at least we have a benchmark for that. Otherwise, we're just adding on things and we're just going to get more resentful later.
So good. So I have a few last questions. And if you were to start all over today with the experience and the knowledge that you have now, what would you do differently?
2 things. One, I would pick a very tight niche and I would build the biggest possible brand in that niche. We have realized, and this is not going to change for a while, that fame is the most efficient business model. And so if my niche was, hey, I am I cut grass, I literally would walk around the neighborhood and say, hey, my name is Sharran Srivatsaa. I'm the #1 grass cutter in Shady Canyon, and I'm done. And literally I would build that brand, because in 3 weeks everyone would be like, you didn't hire the #1 grass cutter. So what happened is, I think we wait to build something, and then we see what we have done, and we look at our experience and our results, and then try to give ourselves the kudos we need. What I'm trying to suggest is to shortcut that and say, what is the brand you want? Own that brand today and live into that brand. So if we woke up in the morning and said, hey, I'm the only grass cutter in Irvine, California that gives you a guaranteed every single time, blah, 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 whatever. Now I'm living into that brand. So that would be the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do is I would only work on projects where I got paid to get a result. So, hey, Raquel, you want to run a 4-minute mile? I am a running coach. Until you run a 4-minute mile, you don't have to pay me. That does two things. One, it makes it an amazing offer where you're like, wait, this is amazing. I'm in, and you tell all your friends. The second is I have to come up with the perfect system to allow you to get that result. So it forces me to dial in on my process, on my capability, on my skill set, and I get really good at what I do. That's why people that get paid to get a result are so good at what they do. If I can just build an amazing brand in a niche and only get paid to get a result, you literally don't have to do anything ever again.
Oh, so good. So for all the woo people that are listening, he said, you basically have to manifest it, embody it, and embrace it as whatever the thing is that you are going to focus and concentrate on.
Yes, 100%.
So you are such an intelligent person, and you are also a student, and it really just inspires me. And you have still today, when I speak to you, you have a lot of like coaches, and you believe in a lot of mentorship. Like, what was one coach that made a tremendous impact on you? And what do you look for in coaches?
Anytime I find somebody amazing, I want to hire them and stack them in my corner. I think about it this way. Have you ever seen Rocky, the movie? The Rocky movies. So Rocky IV is a great movie. If you're listening, picture this. Rocky IV was a movie between Ivan Drago and Rocky Balboa. And this guy Ivan was a Russian boxer, and he had the entire backing of the Russian government. So when you saw him on his corner, where everyone was, they had equipment, people in the right uniforms, they had doctors, they had, people that are wiping his face off. Like, he had an insane team in his corner. But Apollo Creed and Rocky, they had like 2 people, right, who were trying to like wipe blood off his brow. And I was thinking, I want to be the Russian. I want to be the person that has an insane support system in their corner, because if I just stack the deck in my favor, I will just win. So I look for what I call sniper mentors these days. A sniper mentor for me is somebody that has a very specific skill that can get me that can impact me in my life in a very specific way. So I have a health coach, and his very specific skill is just to get my energy up. He's like energy performance. That's all his job is. I have a alignment coach for woo-woo people. Her job is to just make sure that the things that I'm doing in my life are deeply aligned. Her name is Jen. She's fantastic. Mm-hmm. I have a mindset and leadership coach, and she makes sure that I get my languaging right, because the self-talk that what you have with yourself is no fun. I have a leadership coach right now, a business coach, and I run all my big business decisions by him, because when you're inside the bottle, it's hard to read the label. So I can advise you on selling your business, but I need someone to advise me on selling mine because I'm too close to it. So what I look for in a coach is like, am I getting along with them? Which is awesome. My first thing is I ask is, would I work for this person? Would I work for this person? And if I said yes, that means they're very much closer to me hiring them. And I tell them, hey, here's who I am. Here's how I work. I'm a really good coaching client. I just need you to stick with me, and I'll get great results. And so I feel like it is my responsibility to make my coach look good. And that allows me to work much harder.
Speaking of your responsibility to make your coach look good, what do you think makes a great coaching client?
We should link up. I actually recorded an episode on this, which is wild. When the coaching client has deep respect for what the coach can offer and allows and does the work before they get to the calls, I think it's super powerful. The most important thing I will tell you is, it's not what happens while you're in contact with your coach. It's what happens in between contacts with your coach. Our ability to be a great coaching client is not on the call or not on the interaction. It's everything in between. And so I think most coaching clients don't share this one thing with their coach, which is their highest of highs and their lowest of lows. If you just took your life and your highest of highs, as in stuff that you may only share with your spouse or partner, or maybe even they don't get it. Like my wife has no idea that we just bought an $89 million property and I had to pledge my balance sheet to do that. Like my wife has no idea for that. And she's like, hey, where are we going to dinner? That's her conversation, right? And it's okay. But that's a top 5% thing for me. But if my coach doesn't know that, he or she does not know the emotions around it. But at the same time, the bottom 5% things in my life where I'm worried about something or things that I can't talk to my business partners about, I reserve the top 5% and the bottom 5% to share with my coaches because they can then use that to fuel other things for me. So if we are not sharing our top 5% and our bottom 5% with the people that are in our corner, we're completely missing the point because that is what they can help us with the most. Because if they can eliminate the bottom 5% and accentuate the top 5%, we're going to have an insane life. And they're in our corner for that reason. So it's not about the coaching call itself. It's what you do between them to share the top 5 and the bottom 5%.
So good. And so now I'm going to do a quick fire round. We'll just go and ask some questions of Sharran as we wrap up. Is what motivates you?
Seeing how I can be a good dad for my kids motivates me.
What makes you proud?
Watching people that I'm partnered with succeed makes me proud.
What's your greatest fear?
My greatest fear is that I will let people down.
What's your definition of success?
Success is doing what you want to do without having to justify it.
What's the one habit that you've sustained all these years that has paid so much dividends in who you are today?
Waking up at 4:45 every morning and running the 5 a.m. club. One thing that I never thought a night owl would do, but it's shown me that even I can do something that I never thought I would be able to do.
Okay. And as we wrap up, what's next for Sharran and what are you most excited that you're working on?
I'm working on an opportunity right now, which could change the world. And it's in its middle stages. And so I'm hoping that over the next few months, I can make it come to life, and that'll be the beginning of a new chapter.
I love it. Where can people connect with the one and only Sharran?
I think the easiest way would be, since if you're listening to this podcast, I actually have a super secret private podcast that people may enjoy. I only do it for my private clients and my friend. It's called 10K Wisdom. There's 10K because there's $10,000 worth of value, hopefully, in every single episode. There's no intro, no outro. It's straight to the point. It's private, so you can't get it anywhere else. Go to 10kwisdom.com. And so if you like this, you probably would like that. So 10kwisdom.com.
Love it. And as we wrap up, I ask every single guest on our show, what is one thing that Sharran does to play bigger in business and in life?
Every day I ask myself this one conversation: what would Uncle Sharran, who is 30 years from now, what would he say? And that's good reflection that, hey, making this decision is a good decision. Making this decision would be something you'd appreciate. So I always check in with my future self to see if this is going to be aligned with the future path. So that gives me a little bit of calibration of whether I'm doing the right thing today or not.
Well, Sharran, I want to say thank you so much for your time. And I super appreciate you. Thank you for being on our show. And I am so excited to keep cheering you on and to keep playing bigger with you, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Raquel. I appreciate it.